All right, let's get into my MCAT preparation process and just general tips for the MCAT. So for MCAT preparation, I started with Jack Weston daily passages around March 2022, and this was to give me a general idea on what the exam was like, what the format was, how much studying I really need to do in preparation for the exam. And at this point, I hadn't signed up for the MCAT as I was unsure if I was going to be pre-med heading into the end of my junior year. I realized that I might not like industry and engineering, but I agreed to work a summer internship with Eli Lilly to confirm that. And once I started my internship, I quickly realized that pre-med was going to be the best fit, and I started utilizing all the listed resources I have on the slide and signed up for the MCAT essentially the week before school started. And in general, I didn't spend too much on MCAT material and honestly had a bad outlook on what was available. For paid material, I only had AAMC and UWorld, but I used a lot of Khan Academy, all the free exams, Anki, Jack Weston, and Reddit. If I had known what the landscape was better as for like what Blueprint had to offer or A and B tutoring had to offer, I probably would have utilized tutoring. But at the end of the day, by focusing on practice problems and not too much content, I got the score I wanted to. As for resources, really loved UWorld. UWorld gave excellent explanations and there were very challenging questions, and it really helped me understand where my content gaps were. All right, next, Khan Academy offers a ton of free material. Please use the free material. MCAT stuff can be very expensive, and Khan Academy has very great explanation videos to fill in any content gaps, which was essential for me because I didn't take any psych-soc classes until after the MCAT, so I had a lot of holes there. Next is AAMC material, which is essential because it's most realistic to test A. I mean, it's the people who write the test, right? So make sure to do all of the material that they offer. It's honestly some of the cheapest out there, so go ahead and buy it all, or it's going to be packaged with your tutoring. Next, I used a lot of Jack Weston because Jack Weston offers free daily passages, and their cars is great. I believe their cars is the best, but really they have passages for every section and it rotates every single day. And I did this starting in March and I didn't stop until my exam. Now, everyone's heard of Anki. Anki's a great resource for memorization, root memorization, so really good for biochem, for your formulas in physics, amino acids, those kind of things. And I used Miles Down and Jack Sparrow, but I thought making my own cards was the best method. And then lastly, every free exam I could get my hand on. So we're talking Blueprint, TPR. I did them all. And I also used Reddit for further explanations because oftentimes the explanations for those passages or incorrect answers can be sort of mid. As for my main MCAT study schedule, here it is. And I will say making a study schedule early, saved me. I made sure that I had a Google Sheet set up. And there's a ton of resources out there that you can utilize, including MedLeague, to help with creating a study schedule. But this is essential because it gives you structure in your day, as these days are going to be draining. And you don't want to have to decide what I need to do, when I need to study, when I need to eat, when I need to exercise, right? You just do this up front before you get into the grind, okay? So I did this for every single day, and I made sure to mark when I want to do practice exams, when I'm going to switch from more content review to more practice problems. And this could fluctuate. It did fluctuate, right, depending on how I did each day, but it gave me an idea of when I need to be focusing on studying. So I made the study schedule in late April, which is when I finished my semester, and that's also when I bought all my material. So I bought AMC, UWorld, both were about $300. And although I went into the MCAT process somewhat blind because I wasn't in any pre-med orgs at the time, and I hadn't taken psych-soc classes, I made sure to immerse myself with any YouTube videos or free materials to understand what study schedules looked like. And I went in very motivated. I made sure to write down everywhere why I was doing this to stay motivated, and that helped so much on the hard days. And I made sure to prioritize psych-soc because I hadn't taken any classes in psych-soc. And I will say you can self-study through flashcards heavily and you'll do just fine. I went into this not knowing anything about psych-soc, and that was my strongest section. So I went 132 in that section. But with that said, this is my schedule once my internship started, and it was pretty aggressive. And if you do not have a stronger background in some of the harder subjects, say biochem or physics, and those were my favorite classes really in undergrad. So I felt fairly confident, which I could tell from the Jack Weston passages in March, which really helped me feel confidence with the schedule, I don't recommend it unless, you have some assurance in that way. So I'd wake up around 6 and get ready for work. Then I'd get into daily Jack Weston passages. I'd do 2 to 4. If I did 4, it was really just do them all. I would make sure I was working on my timing. So I would be aiming for a time of about 10 questions per 15 minutes in sciences, which would allow you to finish the exam or the section with about 6 minutes to go. So I aim for that kind of time length for questions with Jack Weston, and then about 10 minutes on cars. And this helped me practice what was my pacing for the exam. And I would make sure to record my accuracy and takeaways and general confidence level in that material each day, so I knew what I needed to study later on. If I did 2 passages, then I would also do some Anki on Psych Soc. And I would do this as I was eating breakfast before I, got ready for work, and then head to work. I would work, during essentially the morning shift. And then for lunch, I would study. I would do UWorld, AMC. This is when I was really practicing anything that I was concerned about from the morning. And UWorld, I would always do for topics that I had concerns with and make sure that I understood how to apply knowledge, right? If you know your amino acids, but you can't apply it in context of a question, it's effectively useless. So make sure you're practicing, right? After that, I would finish work and I would drive to a gymnastics gym and I would train. Please work out. Please do things to release stress, okay? I needed this. I mean, if I wasn't working out or training each day, I would drive myself crazy with the schedule. Gymnastics was my outlet and I absolutely loved it. With that said too, I was on the varsity team. I needed to train every day, and this year I was a captain. So I made sure to train every single day just to make sure I had time where I was not thinking about work and I was not thinking about the MCAT. And then I would finish practice about 7:30, sometimes like 8:30, and then I would drive home. And I would clean up, make dinner. I would do everything kind of as fast as I could. I made sure to lay things out where they needed to be before I left for work to make sure I could come back and just get everything done and start studying. It was a big, quick cheap meal, ramen and eggs kind of summer. And I would just study once I got my dinner ready. And so this was heavily on UWorld on any topics that I didn't feel great about from the earlier session. Khan Academy review of those, followed directly by more practice problems. I would take notes because I feel like writing on pen and paper was a way that I would memorize things better. It's the only way I really did in college and continue with UWorld. And that switched over to AMC most heavily the last month of studying, where essentially all I did was AMC. And then I would go to sleep by around 12, really aiming to get 6 hours each night. And this repeated throughout my internship, besides a few weddings where I switched around my schedule and made sure to attend those. And I built that into my schedule early because I knew after a month of grinding, I'm going to want to, see some of my friends, get married and just give myself a weekend to take a break. Now this switched up on Saturday when I wasn't, traveling or taking a little break. I would essentially just do practice exams. So I would recommend not doing it every week, but I did practice exams most weeks that I was in town, and this is the most representative way to measure if you're studying the right way. And so I made sure, if I ever had plateaus, which I did, and which you will have plateaus, that I addressed it by reviewing the exam and understanding what I did wrong. And I would start my review right after I finished the exam. So I would I would wake up, go over a little flashcards, maybe write down some of the mnemonics that I wanted to use for the exam, start the exam. I would take all of my breaks, but I would condense them because on exam day, it isn't a true 10 minutes, right? You're going to have to raise your hand potentially and be walked out of the room. You might have to find the restroom. You might want to go open your locker. This takes time, right? So I would give myself about 6 minutes, right? So I'd finish the exam a little bit early, maybe 3:30 or even earlier. I would then exercise. I'd watch YouTube or Netflix and just mind drop and move around, sweat. I had a pool at my apartment, so maybe go swim just to move, eat a nice dinner, and also kind of like an early dinner, and start some review of the exam. I would only do this for about an hour and a half or to 2 hours. So maybe I got through Chem Phys. Then the night off, I would try to hang out with some of my friends around town or explore the town. Sundays was kind of a similar thing. I would wake up a little bit later, right? Trying to get more sleep, right? This was a time where I'm catching up. I'm doing that REM rebound, right? Catching up. And I would also try to explore the city. I would go to a new coffee shop and test yourself in new environments, right? Like the testing site's not going to be something you're comfortable with. So I'd go to new coffee shops or new areas around town just to give myself something to look forward to, right? And review. I would review heavily every single question, noting, did I get it right for the right answer? Does it make sense? Did my logic not match the logic of the test maker? And how do I match the logic of the test maker? So everything was thinking in the mindset that the test maker, AMC, Blueprint, whoever exam it was, they're correct, right? I need to match their mentality if I'm going to do well in this exam. And I made sure to make flashcards for every single practice question that I did. And that might have been for every single answer choice too, because you're going to find notes from those incorrect answer choices. And then by 5 p.m., I'm taking the rest of the day off. This is when I'm meal prepping for the rest of the week. This is when I'm calling, my family, checking up with them, getting groceries. So this is me time after 5 p.m., right? Now, this is a tight schedule. For some people, it's very doable. For me, it was very tough. And I definitely recommend, planning out time where you're going to separate yourself from MCAT, or it's just going to kind of bleed into everything in your life. And I think one luxury I had was this was not a summer when I was applying. I was going to take a gap year, so I didn't have to work on my primary application. And I really do recommend doing that. Take your MCAT earlier than when you're going to apply, or, if you are going and you don't want to take a gap year, have some of this material going early, right? Work on your primaries at this time. Maybe you don't have to do as many grocery shopping because you're in your undergraduate years. So, use that time to work on your primary application. Before we transition into classes to take before the MCAT, I did want to mention for a more normal schedule, I do recommend around 30 hours of studying for a 4-month schedule. And you're taking this essentially as a part-time job with either one day on the weekend off, or you're utilizing your full weekend so you can ease Monday through Friday. I really do believe that you should use your Monday through Friday to bolster your application in other ways, right? This could be through research, or in my case, working in industry, checking out other jobs that you can do outside of being a physician to make sure that you are trusting in this decision, this 30, 40-year decision, right? But also with that time length, this ultimately depends on your undergraduate background. I studied biomedical engineering, so a lot of the difficult classes for the MCAT, I had a solid understanding for. And if you studied maybe a non-STEM major, I would then consider utilizing MCAT studying as a full-time job, really clearing the 300-hour plane, because this test can really decide what opportunities you have potentially in residency, or just what opportunities you have in medical school. So you want to take this very seriously, as it's a huge factor into your acceptance. All right, but as for classes to take to have success in the MCAT, the number one is biochem. You've probably heard this, but just knowing your amino acids alone is good enough for this one to be number one. And essentially everything in this class is testable material. And I had heard this advice before, and when I realized I potentially could take the MCAT, I also was taking, I did a biochem minor, but I took an advanced biochem class, and this really fortified the content for me, as I did not need to study biochem much after this class. So yes, biology is important, the first B and the B and B, but biochem is going to be way more important than your base level biology. A lot of your biology material, it's not too hard to memorize, right? You just got to root memorization it. You got to just do Anki cards all the time to get that stuff down. But biochemistry, you're really building on it, and you're trying to get a better understanding of how everything works. Now, genetics and physiology is also good testable material on the MCAT, but I also feel like it's nowhere as important as biology or biochem. So if you had to take something out of that route, I would take out genetics or physiology. Now, next is psychology and sociology. Now, I did not take a psych soc class, but I do recommend taking one because the amount of flashcards I had to make, it was a real pain, and it would have been much easier to have just taken a psych soc class. A lot of the material is very interesting, right? But it is a ton of material. It's a ton of flashcards, a ton of people to know. So this will just help ease that process. It's a relatively, these are, historically more easy classes and can bolster your GPA. So definitely recommend taking these leading into the exam. And then the last side, Chem Phys, this is the hardest one. This is definitely the hardest one. So Physics 1, general chemistry, and organic chemistry, that next three, I would say, is the next most important other than biochem, in my opinion. Physics 1 I had to do for engineering. It was something that I liked, but I thought Physics 1 was a bit more helpful than Physics 2, just because foundationally you would understand how to manipulate your units, what units were important for like force or work, right? And that can build into Physics 2, right? And how to do like free body diagrams, which is helpful on the exam. General chemistry, very important, essentially for just stoichiometry, how to balance things, and then acid base as well, which bleeds into organic chemistry 1. Acid base is so important for this exam, and it can be very tricky. Even though, acid and base, you probably learn about this in high school, it gets kind of complex, especially when you're being timed on a long exam. So having those two classes and having a strong understanding of those is going to be extremely important. I would say more so important than the next row, which would be Physics 2. So this is more of your like electrostatics, right, and magnetism. Physical chemistry is important for like thermodynamics, and that one comes up. That one's fairly high yield. And organic chemistry too, just building out some more reactions. So if you didn't touch on aldol, condensation, reactions in organic chemistry 1, you'll hit an Orgo 2. And the labs also are helpful as you need to know page or your chromatography examples. And I definitely recommend taking your labs before the exam. This is something I didn't do. I wish I did because I had to make a ton of flashcards for those classes. All right, let's move into the do's and don'ts of the MCAT, and honestly, just general tips. First being, start early. So this can help you evaluate how much help you need. I mentioned that I started studying in March of 2022, even though my exam was in August, and that March to April period just told me, am I relatively ready to get the score that I want, or do I need to take more classes? Do I need to push things back? And it honestly just gave me confidence that I'm in the right spot to be testing. Use free material 6 months out and start to plan for your ramp up, right? This can be your Jack Weston, your Anki, just to give you an idea of how much material you're lacking or how much material you already have, and honestly how close you are to being test ready. Also, start waking up early. The MCAT is an early test, so start to get used to waking up early, right? And also, this is going to help in medical school. You're going to have to wake up early in general, right? So if you are not able to be high functioning by about 7:30 a.m., you're going to want to practice that, because this exam, it does start at 8 a.m., but if you get there early, you might be starting a little bit early, right? So you want to be ready, because Chem Phys is a very hard section. You don't want to have to be starting up the engine at 7:45 and be having a hard question on acid-base chemistry by 7:55 a.m., right? So if you're ready by 7 a.m. or just getting up at 6:30 a.m., practicing that, then you're going to be more ready to have efficient morning studying sessions, and honestly, your days can become more structured, right? So morning practices really helped me get used to this in college, but you can just set alarms and try to work on maybe even exercises in the morning to get adjusted to that schedule. Next, make sure to record your daily progress, or you will be lost on where to study. So I made a large sheet of topics that were going to be on the exam, and I made sure to highlight them different colors to signify confidence level. So red, yellow, and green being I knew it really well. And then I also did UWorld problems to confirm this. So made sure, I am getting, 4 out of 5 correct. I do know this material well, or it would then switch what color I felt about it. So maybe I'm getting 2 out of 5 correct. So now I move it to a yellow or a red, right? And using those numbers, those accuracies, I knew what I was bad at and I knew what to practice. It also helps because you learn what material shows up that much on the exam, right? If you're getting a style of question a lot and you're good at it, That can build up confidence. It can show you maybe there's certain things I don't need to study that hard. Or on the flip side, if you're doing bad on a certain type of problem, but you never see it on AAMC, then maybe lay off of it a little bit, right? Maybe it doesn't show up that much. You don't have to study it that hard. And this combines with the idea that you should plan out your days of studying and which days to practice taking a practice exam, right? I recommend 2 weeks on, 1 week off. Because if you test every week, you're not going to have enough time through the week to truly decide what I need to pivot with my studying. But if you do 2 weeks on, that middle week, that week off, you can really focus on what were my takeaways from those 2 exams? What am I going to do to make sure when I do 2 more exams the following week that I can really see growth? I recommend doing this for at least 6 exams, with the last 2 exams being right before the actual exam. So it would be 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, then you have your actual exam. So this was really like a 9-week block. And the 2 weeks in a row really builds up the stamina. By the end of this process, you're going to feel like you can just take a practice exam. It's going to feel like a burden, but it's not going to feel nowhere as close as the burden as taking your first one. And as you near the exam, make sure you are prioritizing practice problems and reviewing all the problems, right or wrong, and taking notes on it. And you want to do this as close to as when you took the practice exam or did the questions as possible. Because if you wait to do your review, then you're not going to remember the mentality you were in. So when you're trying to evaluate why you missed a problem, you may not remember. And you definitely want to mark that down. Take notes on your mistakes, right? I would always decide, did I miss this question because of strategy? So did I read this question wrong? Did I not understand what they were asking? Did I apply my knowledge incorrectly? Or is this content-based? Did I genuinely not know the content? And with that said, I found that a lot of it was really not content. If you understand the explanation fundamentally, then it's likely not content. You likely applied your knowledge wrong. Also, if your content could have marked out 3 answers incorrect, like if you knew A, C, and D were incorrect and you still picked one of them, that's strategy. That's not content, right? Now, lastly, try to stay motivated and hone in on your why for medical school. Unmotivated studying is not useful. You're not going to have takeaways, right? So what I always recommend to people that I'm working with is write down your motivation for studying. Write it down on pen and paper. And I did this heavily for gymnastics. It's a big thing in sports. You can kind of have like a vision board, but write down why you're doing medical school, why you want to do it. And this also helps for your personal statement, and put it everywhere. Put it in your car, put it by your bed, put it on your door, right? It reminds you about why this is so important. You know, there's days where you're going to wake up at 6:30 a.m. You're going to hate that you have to study, but you remember the bigger picture and really the rewards you get from doing well in this exam. And that will help you overcome those hard days or when you keep missing questions, right? Because everyone goes through some stagnation. And I will say, with the stagnation and the plateaus, it kind of feels like a glass roof where you can't tell that you're punching through it. It feels like you're capped out, but you will punch through, right? Very commonly happens around like 500s and 510s. Now, lastly, put yourself in the testing scenario. If you can't get into a location that replicates the testing situation, try to do visualization, right? You're going to be in a computer lab-like testing scenario with folders that block your periphery, and this is something you can likely set up for yourself. Perfect. All right, so for do nots, make sure that you're doing outside activities during your MCAT study, right? Like find hobbies, take breaks, play pickleball, rock climb, do anything, right? Because this exam is taxing. And if you don't do outside stuff, then you're not going to stay motivated. It's really going to be draining and not going to allow you to go at this exam with full rigor. So make sure you're taking time to do outside things. And you can also do stuff that just bolsters your application, right? This can also, help excite you to learn, right? And it allows you to tackle the application from 2 fronts. So you're getting your activities as well as your MCAT done at the same amount of times. All right. Also, make sure you're reviewing all problems, okay? You don't want to review only problems that you missed because you might have gotten a question correct for the wrong reason, and you want to make sure you're applying your logic correctly. Do not spend most of your time on content review, right? And this kind of goes the same way, right? You want to make sure that you have your content from classes, but applying knowledge correctly isn't always coming from content review. A lot of it is just from practicing and being used to how questions are structured, right? you can almost get to a point where you can predict what material is going to be on the exam and how they're going to apply it. And this just takes time. This takes time and practice, right? And utilize a vast amount of resources, right? All resources and companies have their strengths and weaknesses, and all of them really have some version of a free resource. So use it all. Use everything you have. The MCAT studying process is expensive, and you're going to want to try to find as reasonably priced resources as possible. And, if you need tutoring, I definitely recommend tutoring. It's a great way to get help on scheduling, knowing what topics to study, but definitely look for alternatives for affordable tutoring, because all the tutors are going to be very solid. They all have great scores, and they all are going to use different methods for your success.